Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters. Now I know what you're thinking. What the heck is this? What are you guys doing? Like what is this that you've bestowed upon this channel? This is not like you. This is very different. This is very strange. Yeah, we're very busy boys. We say it a lot. We're not just saying it to make us sound busy or like that we are doing too much. We're not doing it to gloat essentially. Um, we we really bit off a lot this October when it comes to these new releases, and it's starting to get to the point where we're coming down to the last week of October. We have original content that we want to get out for you guys, and we have 5 films that some of us have seen. We've seen some of these together, and we just don't know how to release them or how to get them on the channel in a way that's not going to bury some of these. So we just kind of sat back and said, let's just do a roundup video. Let's just sit back, talk about 5 new horror films that some of them you can check out now, some of them you can check out here soon, and some should be available in the near future. Yeah, these were probably collected, I want to say, just over the end of September into throughout October. So all of these are recent, all of these are exciting. And yeah, I think this would probably be the best way to cover them. So if this pans out and we do enough for you that you like this method, maybe this is something we can do in the future, because yeah, this isn't the only time of year that we kind of get bogged down. Anytime there's festival stuff going on, anytime there's a lot of things happening in the horror realm, it can be quite an undertaking, and we just don't know when to say no, do we, Luke?
Never. We take as much as we can get, even if we don't have the time to do so. But we talked about it when we first got to October, that 31 of 31. There were so many films being released into October that, hey, we just didn't have the time to cover them all individually. They were all going to kind of release these individually. They're probably going to almost consume each other because of how much content is going to be on the channel. So this seemed to be just the best way to do it. And man, there's still an overabundance of content that we have coming. So this is just one stop, and we're going to be releasing even more individual releases throughout the rest of the month of October. And like Dylan said, we do have some original content that we're working on. So here we are, covering 5 new horror films in a big roundup.
And we'll start things off here with, I wouldn't necessarily know if you call it a short film or an episode. I think they consider them episodes. But we are talking about the new Screambox series, Tales from the Void. Yes, we got a screener for the very first episode, and like we said, we got a chance to see it, but with everything going on, it came out the week of October 13th. So yeah, obviously there was quite a lot going on that weekend with Terrifier. You saw all of our videos we put out, so we just really didn't find a slot where we could fit this one in. But there's so much wonderful talent attached to this. We had to talk about it. We definitely want to fulfill our obligation here. So, Luke, I'm going to let you start things off here with this first episode entitled Into the Unknown.
As soon as Screambox said they were releasing an anthology series, it instantly had my attention. Not a film, but you kind of get that entire story within one episode here, opening and closing it. This one's directed by Joe Lynch, I believe. Mm-hmm. What a strong start to your anthology to have a name like Joe Lynch attached to it. And I'll say this one has really strong Twilight Zone vibes for me. As soon as we dove into this one, really different kind of concept. Something that always, honestly, will have you asking what is going on, I think, at the very beginning and probably even toward the end here. This is something, it's a fun stop for me, It gave me those old school vibes. It is such an intriguing story, just kind of gives you enough to feel satisfied, but again, asking that question of what is going on here. So I thought this take here was rather interesting, just because of, I don't know, I guess where it takes place and just this unique idea of sorts.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. This one I know is it's kind of marketed as it's based off of an r slash no sleep story. I think all of them are. So, these are Reddit stories, and this one is entitled The Black Square. So you get a little bit of that DNA from that story. I'm not super familiar with this one in particular, but it is very interesting to see this brought onto film. And I got to say, the one thing I was very impressed about, and I can say we get this a lot when it comes to Screenbox original content, was just the kind of the visual value that you get out of this. Like, it doesn't look cheap. It looks very, very nice and clean, and everything kind of works together really well. Especially for something that is absolutely going to be on a limited budget, if not a television show budget. So I thought that looked really well. The color palette in this was exceptional. There's a couple of sequences involving a character who's just kind of in this black sludgy like kind of mess, and I thought that it was really, really intriguing. A lot of really cool concepts involved in this one, and I agree with you, Luke. I thought this was a really strong start for an anthology series.
And of course it's got those horror visuals, that sci-fi element of just this one big overlaying concept. But one of the most interesting aspects of this film is, or episode, sorry, is just the kind of social elements that we have. We have a lot of characters in this community playing together and not so nice at times. And I really love how this one particular element, really kind of almost a social commentary of something we're unfamiliar with, can put everyone on unease. They're so tense. And then they almost get annoyed with each other. And I really love the way that these characters play with each other, because it is such a realistic take on it, where it's this off the wall science fiction element that is just thrown in. It wouldn't really make sense in the real world, but the way that all of our characters react seems so authentic, and you can really relate to it, especially in modern times now. Is just something I thought was so fun about this idea. It's, as we go through this is an anthology. I don't know if we're gonna get the rest of the episodes. We were only able to acquire that first screener there for that first episode, but what a strong start, I think, for this. It really opens up. There's a lot of talent attached to it. We talked about in that video that was all the properties being released in October here. There's a lot of big names attached to it. I think this was such a strong start to say, what is the rest of this series going to look like?
Yeah, and I think if they can keep it on the same level of quality, which I don't see why they wouldn't be able to, and just again let these filmmakers like a Joe Lynch come in and show some different sides to them. This is definitely a little bit more subdued for Joe Lynch, I would say, in some aspects. Again, you talked about the social commentary aspect they bring into this, and I thought that was very fun. Reminded me like very lightly about how like The Mist, because I just covered that on a list recently. And just how, like, you have people in a really interesting, odd, unexplainable situation and how they react to each other. So I definitely agree. I think this is one that I would recommend checking out. This gets a recommendation from me. I think it's only 43 minutes, I believe. So you're not going to spend like a whole buttload of time on there. And yeah, I mean, it's good Halloween fun. I think that it's interesting. But even if you don't catch this around October, this is definitely, at least from this first episode, there's nothing here that says you can't watch this at any time during the year.
Certainly, and I would say, this is a recommend for me. Like I said, a strong start for the actual series itself. I'm definitely going to be checking out the next episode, whether we get a screener or not. I'll keep up with this weekly. But I think this was a strong start, and I love the little extra interview that you get afterward of that. Whoever wrote the story, whoever created it, they kind of get a little bit of an insight. I wasn't expecting that after we finish the story, and then that loads up, and we kind of get a little bit of an insight of the creation of the story itself. I love that extra little tidbit that they give here to give you some context of the story.
Yeah, it's nice. It's good to pay homage to where it came from again, with these being Reddit stories and stuff, because a lot of good horror comes from there. A lot of crap, but also a lot of good horror. There's some strong writers who've come from those creepypastas and Reddit story areas. So definitely give Tales from the Void Into the Unknown a watch.
And a film that I was able to check out that Dylan didn't have the time to was The Severed Son. This one is more of I guess you would say, more of a folk horror. It deals with this community. There's never a clarity of what the timestamp is on that, I guess you'd say, in terms of when this is taking place, because it is more of a confined community, I guess you would say. Our lead character is Magpie. This is kind of more of a religious community of sorts, you would say. And
Hmm.
her, oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say something.
Oh no.
Her actual father is kind of the leader of this community. So it has to deal with this. It's a creature feature of sorts. It's got this underlying social commentary toward it as well. Now, when we get into this one, this is a much smaller film, not a big budgeted at all film. And yeah, I think you do feel that, but they do make use of it because it's primarily outside. There are interior shots, but they do spend a lot of time outside, especially for the nature of the story itself. And we're really dealing with a lot of these characters and how they play together of sorts. It's rather intriguing to see, especially when we're dealing with the gender of men versus women in a sense here, and then you kind of have Magpie with this creature thing going on here. There's kind of a motive there I don't want to give away. For me, you really do feel a runtime on this one because it is a very much of a slow burn. A lot of things that we have been seeing, especially in Fantastic Fest. It's not a bad film. I will say it's not something that I think a lot of people can revisit. The one of the leads is Toby Stevens, who plays the dad. I think his performance is absolutely commanding in here. I think if I had to pick someone out to really showcase, it would be his performance, just because he does play this more so no nonsense kind of character, which you definitely don't like, but I think you can appreciate the performance there. So I think this one, while it does present some intrigue, it is only worth a watch for me just because I don't know necessarily if there's any rewatchability in there. And when we kind of get in the monster aspect here, I think there are a few scenes that work, but over the course of the actual film itself, it kind of loses some steam. And I think some of the visuals that you see, I think there are a couple in the trailer when we were preparing before we even had seen this that don't really sell me. And I was kind of hesitant going into it, but I got to be honest, while just minimal scenes worked, overall, I don't think the creature 100% works in this one.
Understood. Yeah, this is one I tried to sit down and watch, but I only got so far into it, probably about a half hour. And it was just simply because we had so many things. This was a Fantastic Fest, watch. So had to pause it and I never got back to it, unfortunately. But Luke, definitely glad you got to finish this one and at least give us some thoughts on it. This one doesn't have a release date as of right now, but it should be coming out hopefully for any of you who are interested in folk horror, who may find this a little bit more interesting, hopefully at the early half of 2025. Next up, we have one that I got to see. Luke did not sit in on this one. Again, this was going on right at the same time that we were doing all of our Terrifier 3 coverage, so I was able to sneak this one in, and that is Puzzle Box, the new film from the studio Welcome Villain, who we are very familiar with on the channel. They've got some wins, they've got some, I would say, almost misses, ones that aren't too bad, but I can say with all certainty that Puzzle Box is their first big miss for me. I found this movie to be, unfortunately, for lack of a nicer or better term, grueling. It is only an hour and 13 minutes, but this movie is very much the feeling of you just have a couple of friends with a camera, they go to an Airbnb and they shoot a found footage horror film. Now, that could be fun. That could work as a student film or something if you're just getting your feet wet. But to sell this to an audience, I had a really tough time with it. I think the biggest issue that I have with it entirely is that it is just the most bare bones found footage movie that I have seen in a long time. There's nothing really fresh here. There's nothing new to really sell you on it. And the stuff that is here that we've seen a dozen times before, there's no real explanation. There's no real kind of attempt to even give you an insight onto what's going on. It is quite literally just people with a camera going from, place to place, room to room, and getting screamed at and chased. And that's the movie. And I mean that in full certainty. It's really a tough watch. I was waiting for this to kind of pick up and grab me at some point, and we just never got there. And again, for this only being an hour and 13 minutes, the last few minutes of this movie, I was just sitting here like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna bring that's going to win me over? And unfortunately, never got there. So yeah, Puzzle Box for me is a slash it. This is definitely one that will, if we did a worst of the year list, would probably end up on it.
That's so unfortunate. We've had such a positive experience with Welcome Villain and their releases, and when you look at something like this on paper, where we've had positive experience a lot of the time with found footage and how unique those can be done, and really using that to your advantage as a creative. But then also you look at the runtime here, and usually those smaller runtimes like that scream to me of, this film's only as long as it needs to be. We're not going to add in any filler. It's going to run lean and mean, no wasted motion. And when you say it kind of just feels a little grueling, like it is too long, the pace is slow, especially when you're doing found footage. It's so hard to do a slow paced found footage film, because it's like those quick cuts, you can turn the camera off and turn it back on. So that's so disappointing. Honestly, the synopsis did not jump out at me when we were looking at the films over the year. So it was one of those things where I was hoping for the best, but they can't all be winners, I guess.
No, they cannot. And this one is available now on VOD. If you do want to check it out, if you are a found footage aficionado, maybe you'll appreciate this. Maybe if that's really your jam and you do kind of want something that's a bit more simplistic, and isn't really trying to push the boundaries of anything, maybe you'll get something out of it. For me, again, this just was not it. This was not something that I'll ever plan on revisiting. And yeah, I definitely can say it's a slash it. And one more from our Fantastic Fest coverage that I actually got to sit down and see. And Luke, you watched about half of this one, I think, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah, again, same scenario. We're coming down to the wire on Fantastic Fest stuff leading into October, and we just bit off a little more than we could chew at the time. But that is Parvlos. This movie is something that I can say, after sitting down with it, watching it all the way through, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that it does have a couple of flaws, but for the most part, I think this movie is a good bit of fun. It's a very, very unique, gruesome, and pretty dark take to like a zombie apocalypse story, but it also has some kind of tongue-in-cheekness to it as well. That's very, very weird. It's something that I did not see coming at all, especially when they start this film. It starts with I will put this out there for anybody who's sensitive to this. There's some animal violence in this, and it is upfront and in there right at the beginning. So don't be expecting to go in here and have a fun time if you don't like to watch animals get attacked and used for food. But this is certainly something that did impress me the longer the film went on. I think that it's just a very interesting take, like I said, on the zombie story. To give you a little bit of background, you essentially have three brothers who are living in this like house out in the woods. It's kind of delegated as a cabin in the description, but it's definitely more of a house. And they have a little bit of a secret. What they're telling their little baby brother is a monster in their basement that they have to take care of. And once you kind of understand what the monster is, I mean, it just takes this film to a very different place. And I thought that overall, the film is a bit too long for me, comes in at just a little over 2 hours. And I think that they could have shortened some stuff here and there. But there is very much a very unique voice being told in this movie. And I thought that was super fresh for a genre that has been done to death, no pun intended, with zombie stuff. This was certainly one that impressed me, and I was very, very happy with by the end of it. So I think the performances are really strong from a young cast of unknowns. And I will say the makeup effects for what we see as some of these zombie-like things, very well done. Very interesting, very intense. There's moments where you kind of don't know what's going to happen as far as the interaction with what they're dealing with. And they really like to twist it and turn it on its head. So I really enjoyed my time with Parvlos.
And unfortunately, to review it, I'd have half a story. Looking into it, I will say, when you're brought into this world, you're playing catch up of exactly what's going on. They do a good job of giving you that exposition of what exactly, setting the table, the dynamic of what has happened without spending too much time on it. At that point, I did enjoy the camaraderie of the three brothers. I think that was done well. I think you can really get lost in those elements. It felt authentic. As far as the overall take, I think as you go into the story, I've got an hour in. At least for me, about 20-25 minutes in, I think you understand some sort of twist or unveiling of where that story is going to go. I don't think that's necessarily too unique. I did get into some of the creature work as well without really getting into that back half of the story, which is where I feel like, the actual meat and potatoes of it lies. But, I guess that the performance from a creature standpoint was not really hitting with me. It just didn't feel like it just felt like things we've seen before, more of a replication of more modern properties, more popular properties. And that's the way we're going to go with it. So, while the dynamic is mildly interesting, I think you do see it coming. I don't think it's going to, catch anyone with a left hook or anything like that. So I'll be honest, as I had gotten into that first hour, it did not grab me like I was hoping it would. But again, most of that story lies in that back half. So it's hard for me to say. I'll say for that first hour, about 56 minutes, it didn't necessarily hit with me, but I would be intrigued to go back when I do have more time and finish that last hour just to see how the story does close up and what other places we do go.
Yeah, and I think the back half to this is certainly a much faster paced film. It gets a bit stronger. But I certainly think that although I do agree with you, I did see kind of the twist, you could say, coming. I think they telegraph it pretty, deliberately. I think that as you get into the later half of the film, I think that that's more forgiven just because there is a lot more going on with just the implication of what they're trying to do. It also has some very heartwarming moments, but it does not shy away from some more gut punches as we get into the end of the film. So I'm going to give Parvlos, after seeing the whole thing, a recommend. I think that this is definitely something if you're into foreign films, if you want to see something that, again, is just a very different take on the zombie genre. I think this one is definitely very well done. It's got a unique voice, and I would be excited to see what the filmmakers come back with next time. Because I think, again, although this is a bit long, and I think they could have trimmed it in a few places to make this a bit more consumable and a bit more of an easier watch, I think that this is definitely a strong first outing.
And finally, rounding out the 5 films here in our little collection of sorts is Mads. This one is a Shudder release, and I believe was dropped on Friday, October 18th. So I
Mhm.
think you should be able to check this one out now. This one has to deal with, we have a young group of kids out partying at night, and we kind of get thrown for a loop, I think, more so. And I don't know if you want to classify this as, I don't know, what would you do? A contagion film? Maybe.
It's strange. It's very similar to a movie that I know you've seen, and I recently revisited for a list. The Sadness, in a lot of ways,
Yes.
you get a little bit
Yeah.
of that. You get a little bit of
People are going mad.
yeah, people are
Just
going
like
crazy.
so it's something I found rather interesting. I think probably the big selling point is here is that it's going to be a one take, which
Hmm.
is more of a technical selling point. I think a lot of people who are interested in that will be excited to actually see this film because it's nothing overly unique. I think more so the uniqueness is how they go about this, kind of the time that they cover, where this is a one take, where there's no missed time in this thing. In the way that they do the story to kind of freshen it up in certain points, I found rather intriguing. I didn't expect that going into it. I had watched. I don't even think I watched a trailer for this one. Actually, I don't think when we had done the 31 for 31, I could not acquire a trailer for this one at the time, and then we ended up getting a screener for it. So I didn't really know what to expect, what the cast was going to look like. This is a very young cast. They're probably in their early 20s, I would
I would
say.
say so.
So you kind of get lost in that element there. They are out partying at night, and I think you do get lost in that element. This one for me, I think the biggest element that I really hooked onto was the tension. Since this is a one take and they're really dealing with that sense of urgency, that I really did feel that a lot of the instances in here were rather tense.
Yeah, I thought that this was really well done. I gotta say, you watched this before me, so you kind of gave me a little bit of a heads up that you enjoyed it, and so I was already confident in the film. I really, really like when movies try their best to attempt a one take kind of scenario. One of the biggest ones I could say that does that, I mean, if we're talking just films, Birdman does a really good simulated one take. I think that's probably one of the bigger ones. But then also, I like to think in the horror realm about like that episode of Haunting of Hill House, I believe
Yes.
it was. That I know it was one of the Mike Flanagan properties where they did that as a full episode. Very, very impressive. This one I can't say for certain. I know that they've said that this is a one take all the way through. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios in this where I would be like, that's ballsy. I don't know if they did it, so I'm sure it's simulated. But going off of what they say, if this is a one go all the way through, congratulations, you guys did a great job. And yeah, it's interesting, man. It's a very weird take on kind of this drug contagion, kind of maddening disease, whatever you want to call this thing. We don't really get a full
It's hard to pin
blown
down.
confirmation of what exactly is afflicting these people, but I don't think that's necessarily the point. That's just the trigger, because once you actually see the scenarios that these people find themselves in, and just kind of these 20 somethings out on the town partying, and it gets really, really gruesome at points and really, really intense. And it's exciting. It's definitely something that I found to be very locked in and engaged with as the movie was moving through. And I think that that is the number one thing that you need to pull off when it comes to a one take or a simulated one take film. You need to make sure that your audience is engaged minute by minute. And I feel like this film does that very well.
Yes, it's those films when you're don't have any passage of time and it's kind of we're going through this instance. If it's an hour and a half, or we're going through an hour and a half of this instance, I think I get worrisome that it's going to drag. It's like, well, what are you going to do? What creative spin are you going to put on this to keep this story moving? And what they do here, I think, was rather interesting because I found myself honestly locked in. I was actually watching. I was on the edge of my seat, not to be a little punny in here, but it was like I was actually interested in the actual story and what was going on because there were some elements in here. Yes, we're out, we're partying. You're kind of just waiting for those instances of horror and gore to happen. So you're never really sure. You're on the edge of your seat of like, how is this scene going to go down? And when they actually pull the trigger on that stuff, it absolutely they make it count. It really does move rather quickly. I felt my heart beating rather fast. I was tense throughout this thing. There's a scene in here where I believe there's a character either on a motorbike or she's on a bicycle. I'm not sure which one it is. And
I think it's a moped.
okay, and it's absolutely terrifying for me. I don't want to lay out the entire instance because I want you as an audience member to go into this fresh, not knowing what to expect. But when you see that motorbike, you're going to know what I'm talking about because it is downright terrifying from some of the audio that you have, just the dynamic that is set up here. It is really scary. And they are able to do that in several different instances without losing any time here.
And I was going to say that's something that does, if I'm looking at this from a technical standpoint and just trying to be really analytical, that does make me believe this is more simulated than it is authentic, because the sound design in this is really impressive. Like, I
Yes.
know that there's a lot of very talented sound design artists who can really take footage that's all done in one go and really make it sound beautiful. But like, could you imagine the kind of undertaking that would be for this, and for some of the sound design in here to be as crisp and as effective as it is? I mean, I just think that that is something that it does lead me to some credence to say, okay, maybe they're bluffing a little bit, but hey, either way, it works. And whether you want to classify this as like a madness type thing, like I said, the sadness I think is the best comparison, although I don't think it goes as hard as some of the stuff in the sadness. It's definitely one of those things where when you're talking about the concept of it, because sort of a zombie movie, the sadness is kind of more of a crazy kind of thing. Very similar here. Maybe even put this one towards like the Crazies, and I'd say more the
Yes.
remake. They're not technically zombies, but they could be. It's very
A
unique,
fine
very
line.
strange. It's kind of it's very fresh, and I gotta say, I think that this is another win for Shudder here. Definitely something that I could see myself coming back to, especially just because I think it's entertaining. Is this something that I'd watch all the time, though? Not really. I think that it's definitely probably got the most excitement out of me on its first go around. I could see multiple viewings kind of, finding parts that I'm like, okay, let's kind of move through this and get through that. But still, for the one time experience, it's an undertaking that I found very impressive. And as a horror film, I think it's done very well, very effective. And again, the balls to try to do a one take, it's nuts. I couldn't imagine all that pressure, but they pulled it off.
Yeah, I mean, from a technical standpoint, I think this was rather well done. Them being able to really bottle up that tension and then sustain it throughout the actual entirety of the film, which again was a big hesitation of mine going into this. But I think it all absolutely works. Even when you're watching this, yeah, I don't know if it's as rewatchable. I think you could watch this one, every couple of years um, just to find some enjoyment out of it. But I think as I was watching this and seeing that one take and how they were able to approach it, I guess, and from a horror perspective, in this idea of contagion or everyone going mad, I think I found myself playing in that space of, well, what else can you apply a one take to in terms of the horror space? And I think that was the most fun there, especially after watching that film to say, this would be interesting or that would be interesting. So I think, this is an easy recommend from what they were able to achieve, but I think it could spark some creativity from any creative going into this and wanting to kind of approach that one take element, because I think it can be applied to several different instances. You just look at this film Mads and see how well done it can be. Again, the story is not overly unique at all. It's something similar that we've seen in films from the past, but that one take really does add some difference to it, just add some gravitas to the story. And from a technical standpoint, I don't think you get much better than this. So for me, this is an easy recommend.
Yeah, and I will also follow up with a recommend. It doesn't quite get to a must see. Again, I think that there's just a couple of things that I think if they maybe would have pushed it a little bit harder, maybe found a different angle to kind of get us in there, because it does kind of fall into some of those kind of zombie maddening tropes that we get to. There's definitely some intense scenes, but if they just would have found another way to kind of push this over the edge beyond a technical level, maybe from a story perspective, I could have seen this easily falling into that must see category for me. But alas, I think it's a good attempt. Maybe if the filmmakers want to come back and do another film, another concept with kind of these one take esque scenarios, I think that they've definitely proven themselves competent of it. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing what they bring to us next, because I think this was definitely a fun outing. Well, there you have it, folks. That is 5 new horror films that you can check out. As we said, some of these are going to be releasing soon. Some of them are out now, like Mads and Tales from the Void. So let us know down below, out of the 5 movies, what are you looking forward to checking out? I mean, we definitely have a wide berth here. A couple of zombie films, a couple of unique approaches, some folk horror. It's an interesting kind of pick-all platter here. I think that this was a bit of a fun idea. What do you think, Luke?
Oh yeah, I like this kind of grab bag. Hey, it is trick or treat season, so you kind of you got your folk horror, you got some sci-fi elements. I don't know. You got a grab bag of things in here. I think so. It's rather intriguing to be able to just meld all this stuff in, kind of pick your poison of sorts, and see what really stands out to you. Because there's so many unique properties in the horror space. I would say that just by it's you're so kind of curating your own experience, but to click on this and kind of get 5 different films that may interest you and kind of getting a little bit of a review, I think is rather intriguing. So I hope whoever watches this gets to walk away and say, maybe 2 of these I can check out, because I think there is a lot of creativity here, whether we like some of it or didn't.
Yeah, and it's always nice to at least highlight films. On this channel, we want to make sure that we're covering as many of the new horror films, independent horror films that we can, so you guys know what's out there. So let us know down below if this is a format that you guys like, because I think like this is something we could find ourselves doing, like we said, especially during festival seasons. There is so much that just gets thrown at you, and then when you have like TV shows now and you have all these other things there, it's like, okay, not only do I have to watch a bunch of movies, but I also have to get through 8 hours of a series. It can be daunting, and I hate to leave stuff on the table. So certainly let us know down below what you thought. And yeah, maybe we'll make this kind of a semi-regular thing. Maybe we'll do some check-ins here and there. But alrighty, guys, it's going to wrap us up here. Make sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button, and yeah, we'll catch you next time. So until then, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.